the next slide, honorable members, good afternoon. We, as the Deputy Minister says, I think when we presented this budget, we had to make sure that we balance a whole lot of things. And we, on one hand, it's important that we promote economic activity. And on the second hand, we have to ensure that we retain public finances to a sustainable path. And that's the main, important issue here that this budget is all about. The other immediate priority, honourable members, is to return the economic growth, to return to rapid economic growth, especially having, locked down the economy before. And we think this mass vaccination program will give us that opportunity to support the reopening of the economy and for economic activity to start. And we think based on that and many other factors, growth will, will reach 3.3% in 2021-22. And in terms of the fiscal policy, there is short-term support of things that we need to do, including fiscal consolidation that's critical and stabilized debt. You'll remember, honorable members, that previously our debt was stabilizing much higher than where it is now. So with the performance on the revenue side, and including some good green shoots that we saw started coming through, resources were obviously available, and we can see that they're stabilizing to 88% of GDP. The other important thing that Deputy Minister mentioned is that around tax measures, we are withdrawing the 40 billion rand that we had indicated this time around last year, so that we give relief, including the 2.2 billion relief to mainly in low-income households and middle-income households. So this budget also focused on that, whilst it's doing many other things. And we have signaled, as you heard in the ministers, that we want to look at the CIT in 2022 and have a process between now and then to see options and possibilities that can emerge. So given that signaling was quite important for us. The other fine thing that we want to raise in this budget, and that we raised, was that debt service costs continue to really be a burden for us. We've increased the contingency reserve to about 12 billion to take care of the vaccination and other priority programs and other emergencies that may emerge during the course of the year. And that's something that is important. But at the end, the Deputy Minister I don't know what happened. Is to ensure that we support Vulindlela and come up with operational issues that are critical to actually bring the economy back to firing at all cylinders. So I will stop here just in terms of the overview, Chair, and give over to Duncan, who will take us through some of the slides. Also, quickly, just tell us where exactly the premise is of some of the things that got us to do things that you are presenting. And thereafter, Edgar Sishi and other colleagues will come through as we present. Thank you very much, Chair. Duncan?
Thanks, DG. Good afternoon, honourable members. I just will be giving you a brief overview of the global and domestic economic outlook. The first table there just talks to our global growth prospects, which of course, as we know, has been boosted by the vaccine rollout globally, as well as stimulus both on the fiscal side and the monetary side, particularly in the developed countries. We therefore expect a global growth recovery that will be supportive for South Africa. In particular, the recovery that we're seeing in China, which is towards the middle of the table there, which is quite robust, and which, as our largest trading partner, will be giving support to the South African economy. China's forecast to grow in 2021 at 8.1%, and India, another large trading partner of South Africa, is forecast to grow at 11.5%. And that, of course, bodes quite well for what we are expecting in South Africa. Our growth rates, which are also in that table, have been revised down slightly better, in fact, in 2020, from -7.8 to -7.2. In 2021, our growth rate remains the same at 3.3. in real terms, and then in 2022 it goes to 2.2%. Next slide, please. The next slide gives us the components of growth from the expenditure side, which is how we look at it. So I've already gone through, honourable members, the middle section of that table, which tells you our new anticipation of real GDP growth in 2020, as well as the outlook over the medium term. What this table now does is goes into some of those details, and I'd like to bring your attention to the 2021 column. That first item there is household consumption, which has been revised down to 2.9% in 2021. And that is mainly due to the pressure we are seeing on households, both from the second wave that we saw into the beginning of 2021 and what that does to economic activity, as well as the impact of the changes in unemployment and what that means for household incomes and the joblessness that has an impact on the ability of households to consume. The second line there in the 2021 column is the final government consumption line, which is actually, although it is a negative 0.1, it has actually been revised much stronger. It was around -2% at the time of the MTBPS. And the reason that number's been revised stronger, Edgar will talk to that later, but that really is about some of the expenditure that government has prioritized this year, including the vaccine rollout, the additional social relief of distress grant funding that's been made available, as well as the presidential employment program or initiative. And those additional government consumption spending shows up in a stronger government consumption number in 2021. And finally, I'd just like to bring members' attention to the gross fixed capital formation, which is a number of -2.4, which has also been brought a little bit lower due to the uncertainty of the pandemic and what that means for companies and their investment, as well as the ongoing electricity constraint and the reliability of the electricity system that is quite weak and therefore affecting the investment choices made by companies. A successful vaccine rollout is likely to boost growth. And of course, there's a big uncertainty around COVID-19. Next slide. There has been some progress on the economic recovery plan. Honourable members, I won't be going through all of these details. I just wanted to make the broad point that it is very important for us to work on making sure that we get these structural reforms through so that they can, in fact, boost our potential growth and raise the ability of the economy to create jobs, which, as we saw with the latest jobs numbers, is a key priority of the government. And this slide just talks to some of the progress that has been made. Next slide. And then finally, on our side, a big part of the progress that we are making is due to Operation Vulindlela, which is a joint initiative between the Presidency and the National Treasury, and it focuses on a particular subset of reforms, particularly in the network industry space, transport, water, electricity, and telecommunications. Deputy Minister Masondu is leading us there, and we are working closely as the Treasury with a team under the leadership of Dr. Sean Phillips, as well as with the team at the Presidency with Mr. Rudy Dix. And these are the reforms that we are focusing on. And in previous budgets, we have spoken about what the impact on growth these reforms could have, and we've done that technical work. And it shows us that if we do get these reforms through, it can have an impact on growth, and it can raise our economic growth rates or potential growth higher than 3%. And that's why Operation Vulindlela is such a big focus of us at the moment. Thank you, honourable members. At this point, I'll hand over to Edgar to talk to the fiscal strategy.
Thank you. Our strategy is predicated on 3 objectives. The first is to narrow the deficit and stabilize debt. The second is to provide continued short-term support to the economy. And the third is to improve the composition of spending, therefore promoting growth by shifting from consumption to investment. And that obviously implies reducing the growth in the compensation budgets. This is the balancing act that we are engaging in over the medium term in this budget. We consider that our efforts to reduce the growth in compensation remain on track. The National Treasury's role in ensuring that settlements in wages are affordable has been affirmed. We do, however, consider that significant risks remain, including as it relates to the public sector wage bill, but also as it relates to the state of state-owned companies. However, the biggest risk is the macroeconomic outlook, as Duncan, as it relates to the uncertainty on the recovery due to its dependence on the vaccine. Just as a reflection, it's important to be reminded of South Africa's fiscal position in the global context. We, as indicated in the past, have noted that South Africa's debt situation in other fiscal policies are not like other emerging market countries around the world. Indeed, South Africa's debt overhangs are more severe. Some of you will know the average emerging market debt situation at the moment is around 60% of GDP. South Africa's debt levels are 20% higher than that, closer to advanced economy territory. As a result, the service costs on that debt, the debt service costs, are expected to average over 20% of tax revenues, which means that out of every 5 Rand in taxes that we collect, 1 Rand goes towards servicing debt. This is twice as large as the median for South Africa's peer countries, as indicated in the slide. South Africa's borrowing similarly remains large standards, as I indicated, and this is indicated in part by the budget deficit. Previously, we indicated that South Africa's deficit has been in negative territory for over a decade, including the primary deficit, and this is expected to be the case, but be more reduced over the medium term. And this is an important foundation for how we think about our fiscal policy approach going forward, because the stance has been expansionary for a very long time when looking at the primary deficit. Let me begin by indicating where we are compared to the 2020 budget. Since the 2020 budget, the deficit has doubled, and the in-year shortfall on revenue is estimated at 213.2 billion rand. These changes reflect the impact of the pandemic, as well as government's response to the pandemic, which prioritized relief for households and businesses alongside a major effort to fund public health. This revenue shortfall remains significant both this year and over the MTF, however, is somewhat improved compared to the estimates from the MTBPS. As the DG indicated earlier, for the purposes of achieving fiscal consolidation, we had penciled in some tax increases. We are now announcing that these tax measures will not be implemented as part of this budget. The tax proposals in the current budget for the purposes of 2021-22 includes higher than inflation adjustments to the personal income tax bracket. So there's direct tax relief of about 2.2 billion rands. And this is offset by an increase in excise duties, as the minister announced during yesterday's speech and as reflected here. Compared to the 2020 budget, main budget non-interest expenditure decreases by 265 billion rands over the medium term. This is somewhat less than what we anticipated both in the June special adjustments budget, but also during the MTBPS, where we're anticipating higher non-interest expenditure reductions. So the non-interest expenditure reductions are somewhat lower than were projected at the time of the MTBPS, as indicated here. In 2021-22 in particular, there are significant increases, particularly for the vaccine and other health pressures related to COVID-19, including an increase in the contingency reserve, as reflected here, towards the latter part of this table, to 12 billion rands in 2021. There are other additions that are made and other amounts that are made available through reprioritization, additions for the Public Employment Initiative of 11 billion, and recapitalization of land for the South African Revenue Services over the MEF. The fiscal framework provides short-term support, as I indicated, to low-income households. There's a 3-month extension of the special COVID-19 relief, social relief of distress grant, as well as an extension of the unemployment insurance funds scheme, as announced by the president. Additional funds, 10.3 billion for the vaccine, but in addition to that 10.3 billion, as I indicated, the contingency reserve is increased in order to make provision for any unforeseen spending pressures arising from both the vaccine or any other emergencies. The plan that we have presented as part of this fiscal strategy is designed to narrow the deficit over time and stabilize public debt. As you can see in the graph on the left-hand side, and as we have indicated on numerous occasions in the past, the fiscal deficit has been in negative territory for more than a decade. Red line that you see in the graph on the left hand, while the light gray line is the tax revenues of government, or mostly the tax revenues of government. And as you can see, government has been spending quite a bit higher than its revenue for a very long time. And this is why the debt has accumulated to the projected 3.9 trillion rands that it will be at the end of next month. The deficit expanded.
Well, we're going to go to an ad break.
At a consolidated level, it more than doubled to 14%. But this fiscal strategy that we tabled yesterday is designed to close that fiscal gap, as you can see, over the medium term, and as a consequence of that, begin to stabilize the gross debt to GDP outlook for government. In the graph on the right-hand side, you can see the debt levels, which are anticipated to reach just over 18% of GDP in the current financial year. This will rise, but not by as much as was anticipated at the time of the NTBPS, due to the reasons which I have outlined earlier, mostly on the revenue side. And so we anticipate to stabilize the debt to GDP at 88.9% of GDP in 88.9% in 2025-26. I've already indicated the narrowing of the consolidated deficit, so I'm not going to go through this, but it is important to indicate how we do this. We do it by mostly reducing growth in the wage bill, but at the same time, we consider that the consolidation effort is growth friendly because it provides support to economic development efforts, in particular by raising the level of capital spending in the budget. The infrastructure fund, for example, continues to receive support in this budget. This slide shows the makeup of the different economic classifications of the budget and how they grow over the medium term. As you can see, putting aside interest payments, capital transfers and capital payments have the fastest growth in this budget. And that is, as I indicated, part of our strategy towards a pro-growth consolidation that focuses on the infrastructure program of government in line with the economic recovery and reconstruction plan. Compensation of employees, which is by far the largest consumption item in the budget, grows minimally. Indeed, the growth rate in compensation is essentially, for all intents and purposes, frozen over the MTF. Notwithstanding the reductions which I referred to earlier, the budget is still very much focused on the social wage. Huge portions of this budget are funding pro-poor programs. And if you look at the makeup of this budget, as reflected here, over half of the allocations go towards learning and culture, which is dominated by education and then health and social development. Indeed, education and social development are by far the largest parts of this budget, far bigger than any other items. 1.2 trillion rands will be spent mostly on education in this budget, followed by social development, which of course is dominated by the social grants. A big challenge remains the debt service costs, as I indicated. A key part of our strategy is focused on reducing the interest burden emanating from the debt that we have accumulated over a number of years. This interest burden is now expected to reach over 900 billion rands over the MTEF. And our strategy is to prevent that from growing any further. The division of revenue remains redistributive. Indeed, the allocations through the intergovernmental fiscal system provide higher per capita allocations to rural provinces and municipalities. If you look at the shares in this table, at the bottom part of the table, you can see that the shares, including for provinces and local government, will be marginally higher over the MTF than they were before. As I head towards a close, this is the last two slides, want to reflect on the financial position of state-owned companies, which remain in many of them in distress and at a risk of default on their debt. The net asset value of DFIs in particular has fallen considerably in the last financial year. Quite a lot of this is due to the losses at the Land Bank, which I've touched on earlier, as well as the Industrial Development Corporation. The Land Bank is proposed to receive money for recapitalization, which will come through reprioritizing within the existing spending envelope of government. In closing, then, let me reflect on the risks to the framework. We understand and we publish risks in the fiscal risk monitor, or fiscal risk statement rather, every year in the MTBPS, and we did the same in the 2020 MTBPS. But this is a summary of the risks that we see to the framework. The first, as I indicated, is in respect of the pandemic itself and what that might do to economic activity and therefore the disruptions in that regard. The second is, of course, on the compensation side, the wage bill does remain a key fiscal risk, given size overall in the envelope, as well as its role in the consolidation effort. The third risk is in respect of the financial position of public entities, state-owned companies as well, and local government, which remains in many parts in a weak financial position. There is finally a risk emanating from debt redemptions of state-owned companies, and this, of course, underlines the importance of improving the financial management and resolving issues related to state-owned companies. I will stop there. This slide is a conclusion of what I've already said. So I'll stop at this point. Thank you.
DG. Hello, DG, are you done with the presentation with your team?
No, thank you very much. We are done.
Okay. Minister and Deputy Minister, you will come at the end, or when we do you do the responses, or you want to come now before members?
No, Chair, I'm sorry to do this to you. I think all members have got the budget review in front of them. I just want to draw your attention to something that you have already looked at. At the beginning of the budget review, we have put in place budget highlights, which I think members have looked at already, which deals with the economic outlook, which is what Duncan was dealing with. It summarizes the budget framework, which is what Edgar was dealing with. And then he also, ideally, we should be going to details about the spending programs, but Edgar has given us the macro picture. But if Mampo is on the line, maybe she could deal with the spending programs. The text proposals, I think Edgar has dealt with, which is fine. The next page deals with the key budget statistics, which is sort of the budget at a glance, in a sense. And I would like to encourage members to spend a bit of time looking at that. I think you've done so already, but I'm just buttressing the point that in order for us to have a fruitful conversation, it's useful to always keep that summary in mind. And I try and keep it literally in mind, in the mind. The next page, which I want to spend 2 seconds on it, which says budget expenditure. I think it's an important page. What's happening now? I think it's an important page. On the left column, so to say, is the consolidated government expenditure. It indicates 2.02 trillion, which is a lot of money. And then on the right, it indicates out of that 2.02 trillion, how much is social services, which is 1.21 trillion. And again, I would like to encourage members to go through this and always have it in mind. On the left is economic development allocations to support economic development. It's important to emphasize the point that economic development is not just going to take place based on a budget like this one. This is meant to support economic activity, to generate economic, the animal spirits of economic agents to get on with the economy and get going. For example, we'll say agriculture and rural development, 27.4 billion. That 27.4 billion cannot carry the whole agriculture. It's just meant to support. Can't carry ZZ2. It's meant to support farmers, economic agents, private enterprise in agriculture, and so on. Peace and security, you see it there. General public services, public admin and fiscal affairs, executive and legislation processes, external affairs, and then the debt service costs that Edgar spoke about, which this year will be 269.7 billion rand, something not to be happy about. We shouldn't be very concerned about this. But on the right, on social services, as you can see, learning and culture, as Edgar was pointing, going down. So, and that social services part, I think, accounts for about 36% of the budget. So when people talk austerity, I don't know what they're talking about. If, for example, 56% of your budget is social services. But anyway, it's in the nature of politics. People have to be seen to be saying something smart and clever, I suppose. I was just summarizing and drawing your attention to the importance of this slide that we should take account of. And Mampo, if Mampo is somewhere on the line, I would like her to look at the line that deals with the party political funding, because I think that is going to become an issue of concern to many of the political parties in parliament. So Mampo, if you're on the line, please look out for that page that deals with political party funding so that we can mention it at the end. You can show the slide at the end of the presentation. Honorable Chair,
Enkomo, all of those at the Malaga Republic, Africa Zone. Honorable members, that's the briefing from the minister and the team. Those who like to make comments, ask questions, can do so by raising their hands in the platform. Secretariat will assist me in identifying members who would like to speak. For now, I see Honorable Dipuo Peters, Dr. George, Louis, Dennis Ryder, Honorable Kaiso, Honorable Phoebe, who's I think is Noxim.
That's me, Chair. That's me. Sorry for that. I'll rename.
I
know. I don't normally use it.
Morolong, Vele Okam, Vusmuzi Charalala.
Slalo.
Utheni
In the right, Chair. I don't know how is yourself.
No. So far, so good. It's better than yesterday.
Thank you.
Let's start. Honorable Peters, over to you.
Apologies, sorry, Chair. You've missed Honorable Sarupen.
Honorable Sarupen. Okay. Honorable Asho Sarupen. Okay. Are we done from your side, Secretariat, in regard to members who would like to speak?
Yes, Chair, that's all.
Okay. If others come during the process of discussions and questions, you will assist me. Over to you, Honorable Peters.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. If given an opportunity, I'll come back later, but I've got one or two questions right now. The one, can I switch off my video?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Minister and Deputy Minister and National Treasury team for the presentation. It is really helpful. But my question is with regard to the fact that in the previous years, the growth projections that you provided us as National Treasury have been very optimistic, but had to be revised downward later. The Minister has since announced that the economy is expected to rebound by 3.3% this year from 7.2 contraction in 2020. Clearly, we cannot expect a V-shaped rebound in South Africa, whereas some countries, including our partners in BRICS, China and India, are projecting rebounds higher than the rate of contraction. Why is South African economy not projected to rebound as strongly as these other developing countries? Can we trust that the National Treasury growth models that they will be, the models that you have presented to us will be more accurate in this particular period? Another question, Chairperson, is that in the past few years, We have been celebrating GDP growth below 2%, and the economy is not creating enough jobs. At this rate, the National Development Plan objectives of halving unemployment and poverty by 2030 looks achievable. Comrade Minister, you know we are in 2021, so the NDP targets for 2030 are left with about 8 to 9 years. Why is it that our economy cannot grow beyond 2%? What is it that we still need to do as a country? What is the role of the private sector in working together with government to make it possible that our economy can grow? How will the jobs that are much needed in this country be created? And how will government generate revenues if the economy is not growing fast enough? It is a concern, Chairperson. If you look at the number of queues of people who queue for the social relief of distress, and it tells you that the number of people that are unemployed. And I'll make an example, Chairperson, to the Minister, that usually when political program and the mass work is allowed, not according to COVID, like now we are in level 3, when you convene a meeting of the public at 10 o'clock, Comrade Minister, and the stadium is full, I get worried because that is a clear indication of the number of people that are unemployed. So it tells you that there's a lot that still needs to be done. But what is the partnership that government through National Treasury is having with the private sector to make it possible that we truly can, for once, have a massive battle against this poverty? Thank you, Chairperson. If given another opportunity, I will come back.
Thanks very much, Honorable Peters. Dr. George, over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Peters has touched on the growth issue. The GDP projections do seem unrealistic and therefore significantly distort the budget projections. And I think that's something we need to pay very close attention to. Our economy can't grow if entrepreneurs can't thrive and are not encouraged to thrive. We see that Section 12J of the Income Tax Act is falling away, and it was originally intended to encourage investment in new ventures. How will you encourage entrepreneurs and small business to grow in the absence of additional tax incentives for this? Then it was mentioned that the corporate tax rate will be lowered after April 2022, but this is on the back of limiting interest deductions and assessed losses. This is extremely vague. My question is then, where are the details of these trade-offs? Because that's what they are, given the significant impact that they will have. Then thirdly, on the retirement fund reform, Minister, you mentioned that Regulation 28 will be amended to make it easier for retirement funds to increase investment in infrastructure. This is money that government clearly wants. Now, we all know that pension funds actually belong to the members and that it is their money. There have been calls for members to be able to leverage their own money to their own benefit, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. What progress is being made on members being able to leverage their own pension fund asset to their own benefit, such as a limited early withdrawal or a broader loan arrangement beyond just a home loan? And then finally, my question on the bailouts to the state-owned enterprises and high government borrowing. That is crowding out service delivery of basic services to the people. If we look at the numbers, that is what is happening, including in the social spending arena. Is there an upper limit to the bailouts, or will these continue unabated? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. George. Honorable Lewis.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, colleagues, and Minister and team from the Treasury. Let me first say, before I answer my questions, that I think it was an extremely difficult year in which to present a budget, and a very dangerous time for South Africa fiscally and financially. And I want to congratulate the Treasury team and the Minister for achieving a sense of being able to avoid a debt crisis in incredibly difficult circumstances and sticking to his guns on debt control. That is certainly to be celebrated, and I think the whole team deserves thanks for that. Obviously, that doesn't mean that there weren't aspects of the budget that we are very critical of, and I think that the decision for the very far below inflation increase in social grants is an indefensible decision, given what my colleague Dr. Dion George has just said about the bailouts, to prioritize yet more bailouts over and above the living needs of the most vulnerable in our society, I think is indefensible and was a very poor decision. I must say, I find it quite a very big surprise and quite inexplicable, but I think says much about the priorities of government. The result, of course, is that the poor in South Africa are getting poorer as a result of below inflation increases and the 27 cents per litre increase in the fuel price, which disproportionately affects the poor rather than the middle class in society. And we've seen is 585 Rand a month, and that line is getting further and further away for the poorest of the poor. Nevertheless, the minister was asked about the social grants decision yesterday. I don't expect him to, he defended it there. So you know, that is a matter now for debate. But I do have some questions. I'd like to know when the budget was signed off by the cabinet, because there's a couple of things missing from the budget book that were in the speech, and of course we also received the speech very late. So I'd just like to know if the minister can tell us when the budget was actually signed off by the cabinet. I've read the red book thoroughly overnight, and I'm you know, it's a long document, so I'm sorry if I've missed it, but I find no reference to the reduction in the corporate tax rate in the red book. So I wonder if someone could just point out the reference to me, or explain why it isn't in the book and what the revenue implications are of that. And just if you can just let us know if it was a late addition to the budget, why was it a late addition and proposed by whom? And then, of course, really the underlying story of yesterday's budget and the reason the numbers work is because you are assuming this enormous 300 billion Rand saving on wages. And really, if that saving does not materialize, then the budget itself does not materialize. So I just wonder if you can discuss that in some more detail. In particular, I'd like to know, the government has tried in the past the option of voluntary retirement, and that didn't work. There was little to no take-up of that early retirement offer. Is the government considering actual retrenchments, headcount reduction, and what is the actual procedure for effecting those? Has the Treasury considered or set out how that process will actually begin to work? And have you started discussions around headcount reduction, retrenchments in effect, with public sector unions? Thank you, Chair. If there's another opportunity, I have other questions.
Thanks, Honorable Lewis. Honorable Ryder, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, thanks to the Minister and the team from Treasury, and echoing Jordan's comments about the tough job you had. Yeah, I think well done, but. So I want to focus a little bit. Honourable De Boer Peters and Dr. George both touched on it. And yeah, the Minister said he's pretty sure we all have the budget review document in front of us. And if you do, if you can turn to page 19 of that, which in the little gray block has a figure which shows two scenarios where there's a deviation of GDP based on two different scenarios. And scenario B, which is the lower one, shows what happens if we have a couple more waves of COVID-19 spreading through our economy and causing similar havoc to what the first couple of waves have caused. So the truth is that the gap between scenario A, which shows a reasonable recovery, which I presume is what is going to result in our 3.3% growth, and scenario B, if we have the more waves, you see a much lower increase and in fact contractions going forward. The gap between the two is in fact the cost of the failure to procure vaccines on time and to roll out the vaccines timeously. And this is the scenario we've already seen playing out. So in terms of that, my question really is, does the 3.3% recovery really reflect the current situation, noting that the vaccine rollout has not happened as we would have hoped to do? And, you know, no betting man, in fact, no sane man or woman would bet against waves 3 and 4 coming and hitting this country later this year because we haven't rolled the vaccine out in time. So in terms of that, you know, is 3.3% really something we should be even talking about, or should we be aiming lower and noting that we're not going to make that kind of growth? The other point that I wanted to make is also from the same document on page 81, and it relates to the debt. The recovery from the debt situation. And on page 81, there are 3 risks to the finance strategy that are detailed. And the one is a widening budget deficit, which we're almost certainly facing, as I say, because of the fact that we're not going to make that 3.3%. The second risk is inflation and exchange rate risks, which again, we will almost certainly see once people see that our economy is not growing anywhere close to what other economies are growing at. And we were shown the slide comparing ourselves where, you know, even our quite hopeful 3.3 is substantially below other peers and other emerging markets even. And then the third risk is a sovereign credit rating further downgrade, which again, based on the recent notes, is almost a certainty. So there are 3 risks to the financing strategy. All 3 hold true. So, you know, it means we're in serious trouble. And I just wanted to know, in terms of that, what is the bond issuance strategy going forward? We know there's been quite an aggressive bond issuance in the past couple of months, and I think it's done reasonably well to stabilize things as they have. But we can't continue with that aggressive strategy going forward because it's becoming more and more expensive when you're looking at 10, 11, 12% bond yields. Chair, and I have more questions certainly on the fact that defense and the police seem to be the 2 hardest hit budgets, departments certainly, and the fact that doesn't seem to be playing out in what the president is doing when he's deploying the SANDF in support of the SAPS, and the fact that there's so much reliance on them at this stage, and now we seem to be hamstringing them from their jobs. Perhaps we can get a comment on the fact that those are the 2 biggest budget cuts. Thank you, Chair, for now.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Kaiso, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me also take this opportunity to express our condolences to the family of Comrade Buthelezi. after he has lost his sister. And we dearly express our deepest condolences to his entire family as this committee. Comrade Chair, I want to state outrightly that we welcome the budget presentation made by the Honorable Minister and his team. So my questions are, I just want to start where one of my comrade, Honorable Dipuo Peters has ended, just to highlight that South Africa is, some analysts argue that South Africa is a sovereign state that issues its own currency and only 11.9% of its debt dominated in foreign currencies. It has also a deep financial sector that had a total assets of about 15.9 trillion rands. 15.9 trillion rands at the end of December 2019. But then, as you are saying that that the financial sector has not been so much supportive towards a number of initiatives that the government is trying to do. So I think it's about time that now it has been dragging its foot. It has to be forced to be drawn to the match, so that its significance can be realized, because we cannot understand why they have a total assets of 15.9 trillion rands that they cannot, they fail to pull their legs towards the crisis that the economy is facing. Therefore, one would support the initiative, the question that both the private sector, the whole social partners have to, play this role that ensures that now there's a growth of the economy. Between 2013 and 2019, the GEPF, for instance, accumulated a surplus of 33.7 billion rands, unlike a private sector fund, which must be fully funded because it can go bust. There is no scenario where the GEPF would have to pay all pensioners on the same day. So, so now there won't be such an event where we will see that happen. So now there will always be nurses and teachers to contribute to the fund. Since there is no reason for the GPF to be fully funded and accumulate such obscene surpluses in a country that has such high levels of poverty, has the government and social partners considered the possibility of drawing financial assets, e.g. the GPF, for instance? So that's one question that one want to get the clarity on. On the other issue, on the jobs, we have lost about 2.2 million jobs in 2020. We have only been able to recover 900,000 of that amount to date, meaning that in reality we have lost 1.3 million jobs. This is the most notable amongst in the SME category. Is it not time that we start to look at how both fiscal and monetary policy should be more mutually reinforcing in bringing about a stimulus for growth in the economy? On the infrastructure, Chairperson, we would like to welcome the ongoing infrastructure commitments, which are major part of economic recovery plan. Our oversight work has revealed that much of the infrastructure that supports the economy requires maintenance and replacement. The budget responds to this in committing 791 billion rand in an infrastructure investment program. Yet the budget review states that the government does not have sufficient resources for the rollout, and therefore the private sector is being sought out to assist in this process. Beyond commitment, do we have certainly the funds from the private sector will materialize on the scale required? Last question, Chair, last two. On local government, we are aware that the financial governance remains a challenge for many municipalities. Money that is owed to municipalities and money owed by municipalities. Extending the municipal systems improvement grant is welcomed. But is this going to be enough to deal with the annual recurring unfunded monies that local government sits with? On fiscal consolidation, the Minister of Finance has in previous budget used the ALU Forex, a better testing plant, as the metaphor of government fiscal policy approach, while the President in his SONA used the symbol of Fein Boss, a plan that raises after a failed fire. In the light of the shocking 32.5% official unemployment rate announced by Statistics South Africa on Tuesday, which represents a 1.7% increase in the fourth quarter, the situation appears to be closer to the President's symbolism of a failed fire. Why didn't the National Treasury make more significant allocation to employment creation beyond the presidential job stimulus, which are effectively temporary public works programs? So, otherwise, the ANC welcomes the funding of vacancies on a large scale, which was announced by the minister. However, the numbers presented by the minister in the budget yesterday suggest that there is no much mobilization of resources on the scale required to accelerate recovery, and even less to promote reconstructions towards a more dynamic, equitable, inclusive economy. How would the minister respond to the charge by analysts, particularly from the progressive movement, that the budget falls back on austerity paid for mostly by the poorest citizens? I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Honorable Kaiso. Honorable Abraham.
Thank you, Chair. Let me thank the opportunity to be able to say something on the budget. Chair, let me start off by saying that much as we appreciate the input from National Treasury, we note as well that your team, DG, today is a men's only team, and I was looking forward when the minister was calling upon Mampo, and I thought, there comes a woman. I'm just saying, DG, I hope that the representation today does not reflect what is pertaining in National Treasury, because I know that sometimes you do come with your women's only team. Coming to the budget, you know, as a team finance, we want to really appreciate the budget as it was presented yesterday. But of course, when it comes to issues of finance, we cannot be completely satisfied. We have a few issues to raise. My take, for example, in this instance, is around the issue of the money that has been pumped into the vaccination program. I am completely thrilled by that. However, Chairperson, for me, the transversal and oversight function of the finance department comes in here, because my view is that we then have a duty to ensure that vaccination rolls out in all areas of our country. This, for me, says there should be some working relations between National Treasury and Health. Quickly, let me go to the issue that has already been raised about what the proposal is for basic education. Remember, Chair, that in his State of the Nation address, the President did indicate that we need to regain lost time and improve educational outcomes. Now, the budget review indicates that low compensation growth of 0.8% over the MTF period and early retirements will reduce the number of teachers, and with rising numbers of learners, this implies larger classes, especially in the no-fee schools, which will negatively affect the learning outcomes, contrary to what the president pronounced. Chair, this reflects a cause and effect relationship which can in part be attributed to the budget. Can we have a comment on this? When it comes to social development, Chair, the budget review states this function is aimed to reduce poverty and inequality by providing social welfare services and grants. Chair, the total social grant spending has been reduced by 5.8 billion in 21-22 and 10.7 in 22-23 and 19 billion in the year 2023-24. This is for the first time in more than a decade. Now, all grant values will increase by less than inflation, whilst the number of beneficiaries are expected to increase by 300,000 over the same period. Chair, the minister announced social grant increases that were less than 3.34 inflation rate, which means that people will have less money in their pockets over the 3-year period after taking into account inflation. Chair, as you correctly know, grants are in effect increasing by 1.6. Old age, disability and care dependency grant will increase by 30 rands to 1.8. Child support by 30 rands to 4.6 and so on. Why did Treasury opt for these below inflation increases given the fact that many families depend on grants to survive? According to Statistics SA's 2019 report, over 55.5%, this is almost 30.3 million people of South African population is living in poverty at the national upper poverty line. What measures are in the 2021 budget to address the extreme levels of poverty, hunger, and destitution? Quickly, Chair, coming to the public sector wage. The proposed 303 billion cut over 4 years for public sector will lead to a lower demand side push in the economy and not result in the intended growth that is needed. Further, this frames the way for the lowering of the morale in the public sector, especially since performance management, something that is needed and is a collective bargaining matter, being cut out. The likelihood, Chair, of skills leaving public sector is a real prospect. We are supposed to be building social cohesion, and the proposals are likely to do just the opposite. Can we have a comment on this one? Chair, members have spoken a lot about economic growth. My slight clarity is, how will the country increase GDP growth to create fiscal sustainability while Treasury plans to withdraw about 300 billion from the economy during the next 3 years? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Abraham. Honorable Mrolo.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me too join colleagues in commending the Minister, the DM and the DG and the entire National Treasury team for a commendable budget under the most difficult of circumstances. Now, Chairperson, let me also preface my questions by indicating that I may have lost connectivity during the briefing. And therefore, it's possible that some of the issues may have been touched on. Now, the first question is that according to the knowledge of the Minister, will the private medical aid contribute to the purchase of vaccines for their members as well as for the citizens not covered by the medical aid as a form of social solidarity? The second question is that the infrastructure fund has been budgeted for at about 4 billion. Can the Treasury indicate to us where this 4 billion has been allocated to and how the funding will be leveraged to increase infrastructure investment in the country? On the public sector wage bill, does the minister believe that we can hold a line of increases in the wage bill of about 1.2% for the next 3 years? What does Treasury feel? What is the view of the Treasury with respect to the notion that there should be a special allocation, at least to health and frontline workers who have carried us through this crisis? And maybe the final question, Chair, is has the State Bank and the Sovereign Wealth Fund been budgeted for? If not, why not? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mrolo. Honorable Okam.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minister, thank you very much, and also to the team of Treasury. Honorable Minister, I always thought that being an undertaker must be the worst job in the world. I think at this stage you are beating undertakers. I think really you've got the worst job in the world at the moment. Honorable Minister, you last year said that our budget does not leave room for any mistakes. There are no room to do things wrong. We need to do things right. If you look at what we have been presented with now, it says that the fiscal policy concentrates on a few things, one of which is debt stabilization. Our gross debt to GDP is projected to stabilize at 88.9% of GDP in 25-26. Our current debt service cost is 960 billion rands over the medium-term economical framework. It is the third largest spending item by function in our budget. Now, if we are going to have room for mistakes, or if mistakes are going to be made, that amount will grow. This budget that you presented to us does not leave any room for any mistakes. Therefore, I want to commend you on one thing that you did over the last week. In a parliamentary written question that I wrote to you, in which you answered me with regards to the Reserve Bank's nationalization, you came last week and you confirmed that the government will not nationalize the Reserve Bank, and you gave certain reasons why, and that are some of the reasons that we as the Democratic Alliance posted to you over the last few years. So I commend you on that. That is one of the steps that walks in the right direction of creating stability. If you look at our budget deficit at the moment, it is 14% of GDP. You say that it will narrow to 6.3% of GDP in 23-24, and that we are on track to achieve a fiscal surplus in 24-25. Again, to achieve this, as well as to achieve the gross debt to GDP ratios, we cannot afford to make any mistakes. Now, I want to then come and maybe touch on the political side of this, but this is what it is about. We cannot make any mistakes, but yet we are still bailing out state-owned enterprises. Government is still doing and pursuing its expropriation of land without compensation that we all know led to downgrades. And we know that downgrades will make that we pay higher interest rates and that we obtain debt at higher cost, which will in turn take services away from our people. Isn't it high time that you said yesterday that there are certain stuff that are above your pay grade, but isn't it high time that you and your ministry do stuff that are within your pay grade? And stuff that are within your pay grade is to advise government on what will be to the detriment of our country. I am quite sure that if we create an environment that is conducive for investment. It will lead to job creation, it will lead to lower debt cost, it will improve our economy, and it will help us to maybe achieve what you have set out here to do. To give you an example, Operation Vulindlela says that you say there that you will be reviewing the regulatory framework and processes that make it difficult to import scarce skills. My opinion is to look at it from a different way and say that if government stop the implementation of their draconian BEE policies, we will not lose our own people that might have some of those skills, and we will keep them here. To give you one example, Mr. Edgar Sishi says on slide 19, a financial position of public entities remains weak as a consequence of poor financial management. What will you do as a minister and your ministry to assist in making sure that we don't make those same mistakes in our public enterprises, our failing state-owned enterprises? You are the guy that's carrying the purse. Surely there must be some sort of an incentive for good work and some sort of a penalty for bad work. But we cannot keep on bailing out state-owned enterprises. Let me give you an idea. Our biggest threat at this stage is this COVID virus. Yet, the amount of money that you have made available over a 2-year period for the distribution of vaccines is less than what has been given last year to the SAA. Last year, SAA received 12 billion, I'm rounding my figures, and you are giving far less than that over a 2-year period for the distribution of vaccines. Surely that cannot be. Honorable Dipuo Peters touched on this, and that is that we get these figures, but they are always a downward adjustment. So I don't know how this will be achieved if we are not going to put stuff in place to prevent those downward adjustments. Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. I would like to get some clarity on that, and all of the best for the Honourable Minister in implementing and hopefully achieving this. Thank you.
Honorable Chabalala, over to you.
Hello, Chairperson.
Mangwen.
Hello, Chair. It's Lubabaro, Chairperson.
Oh, we lost Chabalala.
He has logged out, Chairperson, because there is a house sitting in the legislature, Chair. But his question is on the chat box. I don't know whether you want me to try and read it, or maybe let's assume that colleagues from National Treasury are able to capture it, and then you can just move to the other members.
Yeah, no, I think they are able to see it on the platform. Let's move to Honorable Sarupen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, just with regards to the presentation received today, during the course of the presentation, it was stated that tax increases were penciled in, but then they decided to walk back on them. I'd like to know, in the interest of transparency, what tax increases were planned, and is that still coming over the medium term, apart from the excise duties and fuel levy? Were there any personal income tax increases that were considered, that was planned? Is it coming over the medium term? What is the actual future around taxes and tax increases? Then secondly, I'd like to know what steps National Treasury is taking with regards to price benchmarking for goods and services, because cost escalation in the procurement of goods and services is actually beginning to become a critical problem for the state, considering the extremely constrained fiscal environment that we're in. And we can't have situations where SOEs are paying 20 Rand for a bottle of water, for example. So what are they going to do for that, and what are they going to do to ensure that there are caps or to make sure that procurement happens at a reasonable price? And this goes to my next question, which is around improving the multiplier effect of state expenditure. Currently, analysts say that for the point of for every Rand taxed out of the economy, state expenditure then only has a multiplier effect of up to 60 cents. So that currently we're not getting a good multiplier effect out of the state. And I'd like to know what steps will be taken to massively improve that multiplier effect. And this goes to price benchmarking and cutting leakage in the system. Then I'd like to know from Treasury, considering that, and this has been touched on before, that the state has missed its revenue projections and targets consistently over a very long period of time now, will the state be able to avoid a fiscal cliff if it misses its debt projections, if its growth projections, and its revenue projections over the next 3 years? How close is it going to be getting if it misses its projections for growth? And then my last question, Chair, because this happens fairly frequently financial year after financial year, is it the intention this financial year to empty out the contingency reserve again for SOE bailouts, as has been done previously time and time again? And then it's snuck in through an adjustment budget or emergency circumstance. And I'd like to know what the intention is for this year's contingency reserve. Does it exist just to be used as a bailout later, or is it actually going to be used as a contingency reserve this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sarpen, and honorable members who have raised questions and comments. Honorable Minister, I've
raised my hand. I think it's still
okay. Honorable, okay. There's Honorable Njandu, Honorable Shibambu, Honorable Peters. These are the last three hands now. The minister responds with his team. If there will be follow-up, members will indicate. Honorable Njandu, then Honorable Shibambu, then Peters.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much, honorable members. I will only have one question to the Minister and also to National Treasury to welcome first the presentation from the Minister and the Deputy Minister and Treasury. Chairperson, my question will be around the NSFAS. The Minister of Higher Education, when he spoke about the NSFAS funding for 2021, he stressed out that there will be a shortage in terms of the NSFAS, but the minister did mention yesterday around NSFAS. I just want to check whether will it be catering for sufficient for the 2021 so that we don't have the previous challenges that we had in terms of the NSFAS. I think, Chairperson, that's my question. Thank you very much.
Honorable Njandu, Honorable Shibambu.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. We're going to make some few observations in relation to the budget that has been presented yesterday. You know that our overall observation is the fact that the design of South Africa's economy and budgeting thereafter fails to respond to the structural deficiencies of South Africa's economy. The very fact that we've got an economy that has got is not as industrialized and is not based on an expanded manufacturing sector. And that is a sector that is mostly responsible for economic growth. In the budget that has been presented in the details of it, the allocation for the department that deals with industrial policy has been reduced by 1.3 billion rand. It's in the numbers that National Treasury has dealt with. And that is problematic because the only way to deal with the debt crisis is to expand the economy, the productive economy, broaden the revenue base, and then are able to meet the debt obligations. Fiscal consolidation and austerity have never been a mechanism to stabilize debt anywhere in the world. There is no scientific illustration anywhere in the world that says that fiscal consolidation can make you meet your debt obligations in the manner that it is. And we'll illustrate just now that effectively we are still in an austerity budget. Whatever can be said by the Minister of Finance, we are still in an austerity budget. Now, the issue is that for you to drive a proper industrial expansion economy, you need energy stability. You need the stability in terms of the supply of electricity in a manner that it is. But the recent past history has illustrated that the independent power producers have not contributed to energy stability in South Africa. They've instead worsened the financial crisis of Eskom, because the amount of money that Eskom is paying to independent power producers for electricity costs per unit is far much higher than what they do in terms of their own internal generation. I think that we might need to have a separate session, Chair, to look into the fiscal costs and burden of IPPs on Eskom, because if we do not stabilize Eskom, we're going to have a permanent crisis, a perennial crisis of no reliable and dependable energy sources, and that has got a direct impact on industry and therefore economic growth that is much needed to expand the revenue base, create jobs, and thereafter defeat poverty. That is one issue that we must look into as one of the issues. But also we need to get a proper discussion, and of course it cuts across on this intention to decommission coal as a source of energy. We understand, and all of us agree that we need to have renewable energy. We should reduce the carbon emissions, but there is now scientific evidence that is coming from CSIR that you can continue to use coal as a base load, but then utilize the clean coal technologies, a variety of them, which have been domestically developed here in South Africa, that can continue to use the natural resources, which is in abundance here in South Africa, to produce energy, because renewable energy forms that are being implemented in South Africa are not dependable sources of energy. And anyone who claims that such is the case is not telling the truth, is a liar in the manner that it is. And then we must then be able to deal with that differently. I want to ask a question in terms of the debt, the loan which you took from IMF of 100 billion, almost like all the loans that have taken amount to 100 billion, but your debt obligations are above 200 billion. Like your debt servicing costs are above 200 billion. And then you go and borrow 100 billion. And you're borrowing money from the IMF to pay your debts, like and even have much more bigger debt obligations. What is the logic in borrowing 100 billion when you know that annually you have to pay 200 billion in debt servicing costs that happen? And then you have said that you're going to allocate 10 billion rands for the procurement of vaccines. How much vaccine are you going to procure with 10 billion rands? So, because you would possibly know now, because we've already paid for the vaccines that came and later on are going to expire in April. You have paid for vaccines that are coming from Johnson & Johnson, that are delivered, parts of them. So you will then be able to know that how much vaccines are we going to buy with 10 billion rands, because we cannot just celebrate the figure of 10 billion without knowing just how much coverage are we going to have from that particular 10 billion, so that we then are able to then determine and assess this properly. Because my fact that 10 billion is inadequate or is an over allocation, we do not know now, because we do not know what is the cost of vaccines. The National Treasury, which is responsible for paying of these vaccines, has not disclosed that the Department of Health is relying on the NDAs to avoid the necessary accountability in that particular regard. But also, are we going to comply with procurement policies in terms of the procurement of vaccines? And your procurement policies now, they basically emphasize price as the main determinant of who must supply what form of vaccines. It cannot just be a political decision that we're going to take Johnson & Johnson vaccines vis-a-vis Sputnik V from Russia, or vis-a-vis whichever vaccine that comes from other parts of the world. If these vaccines have been scientifically proven to be effective, we need to then apply the price mechanism in this particular context so that we use the little resources that we have to bring as much vaccines as possible into South Africa. So the procurement policies have to be complied with. I don't think this must even be a question. It must be an instruction that is given to National Treasury that in the procurement of vaccines, we need to look into our procurement policy so that we derive value out of the vaccines that are going to be procured. Now, in the overall budget and the MTEF that has been presented here, the overall expenditure, the consolidated expenditure, is going to be reduced by 65 billion rand in the 2021 to 2022 budget, by 90 billion rand in the 2022-2023 budget, and by more than 140 billion in the 2023-2024 budget. That is budget reduction. It's part of the fiscal consolidation austerity measures that are being implemented by National Treasury. So we must not be misled to think that because nominally the figure of 200 billion sounds too huge, you then say, no, there's no fiscal consolidation, there is no austerity because the number is higher. Once you start reducing the government expenditure with the purpose of trying to meet your debt obligations, that is austerity. It's basic textbook knowledge, which I thought people who claim to be economists will understand and know. And what is tragic about this is that even the IMF, which is the godfather of austerity measures and fiscal consolidations, has come to the realization and acknowledgement that such methods of resource management and budget allocation does not bring about the necessary growth in the economy, does not help in terms of dealing with the developmental and poverty challenges that confront society. How do you, for instance, decrease social grants allocations? What is going to happen when the numbers of recipients are inevitably going to increase? What is going to happen in terms of that? So because if you increase social grants by below inflation rates, you are effectively reducing the value of the amount which you are giving to social grants recipients, to granies, to everyone else there. There's also a reduction in the education allocations, meaning that a lesser number of students are going to be allowed entry into institutions of higher learning because of this fiscal consolidation, which you are denying without any scientific value in terms of what happens. Those are our immediate observations. Chair will discuss the details and expose the right-wing neoliberal budget of National Treasury. When we then deal with the debate later on, there's no amount of childishness that is going to scare us from exposing the fact that this is an austerity budget which is not going to grow the economy. You are in the process of even decreasing the meager and insignificant allocation that was made onto industrial policy and industrialization. That has to change if we are serious about expanding the economy, broadening the revenue base, and meeting our debt obligations. In the manner that the budget is presented now, it is of no value to South African economy and therefore society for developmental purposes. Thank you, Chair.
Whilst in a hybrid system setting, this is the basic expression of the changing times of which we live in today. As the ANC in the Higher Education, Science and Innovation Portfolio Committee, we acknowledge the contribution of all South Africans in advancing principles and values in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And as such, the loss of Professor Belinda Bozoli is not only a loss to the Democratic Alliance and her family, but a great loss to the Portfolio Committee, Parliament, the academic fraternity, and the nation at large. Professor Bozoli spent a great time of her life serving and leading in academia, from head of sociology at West University to eventually being a deputy vice chancellor at West University. Her commitment to the space of academia and the post-school education and training sector granted her various forms of recognition as a renowned academic. And her transition from academia to being a parliamentarian is a transition which shows her yearning to serve and contribute to society as a sociologist. Higher education, science, and innovation play a critical role in human development, but also in the political, economic, and social development of the country. Coming from different political backgrounds and being committed to following through the policies and manifestos of our political parties, it is inevitable that we would disagree with some of Ms. Pozoli's views. However, it goes without contestation that as a critical member of the Portfolio Committee, she equally greatly provided very objective inputs which bode well for the post-schooling education and training sector. The late Professor Belinda Pozoli held strong perspective on various matters in higher education, from funding, curriculum, academic freedom, and governance in sector. Those of serving in the PSET sector must commit ourselves to ensuring that the programs outlined under this department meet their mandate to contribute to the development of our nation. Looking at the accolades of Professor Pozoli as a reputable woman in academia, we must ensure that the department's goals to expand the number of women in postgraduate studies is met, particularly to ensure that we produce more young Black women, academics, and professors. As we fight the current scourge of gender injustice in our country, let us also acknowledge that Ms. Pozoli was also a feminist scholar, and in 1983, she published an article called Marxist Feminism and South African Studies. In this paper, Professor Pozoli speaks on what other socialist and Marxist feminist writers have said, in saying that they have revised and deepened our understanding of the wider relations between gender, class, and capitalism, thus lead to challenging of some of the unquestioned views under Marxism. As an academic and a scholar who also focused on Marxism, she appreciated the essence of knowledge embodied and embedded in different schools of thoughts in bringing about understanding of society. Thus, allow me share with you that during one of our first meetings as the Portfolio Committee of Higher Education, Science and Innovation in the 6th administration, Professor Pozoli indicated great concern around the quality of the curriculum under the process of expanding funding for post-school education. We must commit ourselves as a sector to ensuring that as we change forthwith expanding access to post-school education, that the young people of this country are given a quality education that will give them the relevant skills and knowledge to make them active participants of our economy. We must ensure that our education system provides all our people with the opportunity to explore and develop their potential despite their race, class, creed, or sexual orientation. Our nation is confronted with triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and such we should all build towards an equitable society. Again, as an African National Congress that remains committed to serving the people of South Africa, we compliment all patriots who advance and uphold the values and principles of our Constitution despite having contending perspectives. This attitude is the marvel of our democracy, and it breeds a dialectical relation which brings about development. So, to the Democratic Alliance, our heartfelt condolences, colleagues. Noma ngihambe esigodini sethu zokufa, angikwesabe okubi. To the Pozoli family, we send our heartfelt condolences. To the husband and 3 children. And Ms. Pozoli, you have lost a wife and a mother. Tutuzekani, and thank you for sharing her with us as a nation. Akwehlanga lungehlanga sonke sizomlandela. I thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone from the EFF?
Yes, Deputy Speaker.
Okay, go ahead, Ndati.
Thank you very much.
The EFF sends its condolences to the late Honorable Professor Belinda Pozzoli of the Democratic Alliance, who passed away tragically last year. She was a committed servant of our organization and the country, who, despite our ideological and policy differences, remained an upright servant of our nation. We must state for the record that Honorable Pozzoli was an opponent in our quest for economic freedom in our lifetime. As far back as in her tenure at the University of Witwatersrand, Honorable Pozzoli had a distinct perspective on the sociological problems confronting South Africa and was an intellectual in her own right. Her standing as an opponent, however, was a valuable one. As an organization, the EFF cherishes the intellectual debate and what is known as polemics in our traditional school of thought. We are of the view that ideas can only be sharpened and bettered through the process of vigorous interrogation and inquiry, so that we are able to express our policies with confidence and create an environment where superior logic prevails. This is the valuable contribution that Professor Pozzoli made, and for that we extend our gratitude and respect. The political space has suffered many losses across all political party lines, and the toll continues to rise. These are servants of our nation who are part and parcel of our democratic order and conduct the duty of oversight diligently to ensure that the social contract between those who govern and those who elected them is fair, free from corruption, and that service delivery remains a priority. We send our condolences to the Democratic Alliance and the Pozzoli family for giving us a servant who, despite our differences, was able to conduct her work of oversight diligently and present her views without fear or favor. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. From the IFP is Honorable Ngobo.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Speaker, the Inkatha Freedom Party would like to express its deepest condolences to the Democratic Alliance, as well as the family, friends, and colleagues of Professor Belinda Pozzoli, who passed away in December last year. Prior to her election to the National Assembly in 2014, Professor Pozzoli made her mark as a highly regarded academic and published author. She completed degrees at the University of Witwatersrand and as well as University of Sussex. She spent much of her academic career at the University of Witwatersrand, where she became Deputy Vice Chancellor in 2002. In 2014, after being elected as a Member of Parliament for the Democratic Alliance, she diligently served as a member of the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training, as well as the DA's Shadow Minister for Higher Education and Training. Professor Pozzoli was re-elected in 2019 and continued to serve as the DA Shadow Minister for Higher Education, Science and Technology. Professor Pozzoli was kind-hearted, attentive, and knowledgeable, and she also sought to learn from others. She was known deeply as a deeply committed to higher education in South Africa, and described by DA as being a true patriot, a fighter of principle and true democrat. Her former employer, the Witwatersrand University, described her as an illustrious academic and strategic leader. We would like to pay tribute to Professor Pozzoli and her lifelong commitment, as well as the contributions made towards strengthening and uplifting higher education in South Africa. I again echo the heartfelt condolences of our leader in Parliament, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and all of the IFP members in the National Assembly. May her soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the FF Plus, Honorable W.J. Boshoff on virtual.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, when I realized that I was appointed by my party to the Higher Education Committee, I also realized that it would be a daunting privilege to share a seat in that committee with Professor Pozzoli. That is because, of course, we are political opponents and we did not share all our beliefs. But on the other hand, she is a very highly regarded academic with an extensive experience in that area, and would definitely be somebody with a whole lot to contribute, which I had done already from 2014 to 2019. I met her once when the committee constituted, and to my surprise, I learned that my late mother grew up in the same street where she and her family lived. That's just incidental, but in a sense, it was a very interesting connection between us. It was with really saddening news to hear that she was seriously ill, and that she was prevented by this illness to attend the physical proceedings of Parliament and of the committees. And in fact, I think anybody on the Higher Education Committee would agree that it was one of the advantages of the virtual era, which dawned upon us in the state of lockdown, that we had access to the wide experience and knowledge of Professor Bozoли once again. As it is the case with cancer, it has a way to sometimes seem as if it's going away, and maybe it's light at the other end of the tunnel, and then it returns as if with vengeance. Therefore, it was again, and in this instance, final saddening news to learn in December that Professor Bozoli has left us on this part of the gap between life and death. From the side of the Freedom Front, we convey our condolences to her family, Professor Charles van Onselen, whom I have never met, Gareth, whom I have met shortly and just for a moment, just after I had heard the news of his mother's illness, and also the other children. Death is never an easy thing to deal with, but it makes it easier if one knows how many people carry one in their prayers and their thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We now invite from the ACDP, Honourable Steve Swart.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the ACDP would like to express its deepest condolences to the family and friends of the late DA MP, Professor Belinda Bozoli, like our colleagues have done. She was indeed an illustrious academic who shaped the hearts and minds of her students and colleagues in South Africa and worldwide to her final breath. And in a moving tribute, her colleague, Professor Catherine Burns, refers to hers as a brave and beautiful life that had ripples far beyond South Africa. So beyond fleeting greetings in Parliament, I didn't have much contact with Professor Bozoli, and I'm deeply sorry that I didn't do that, given that I could have learned so much from her. Life is indeed fleeting, as I've said before, like a vapor, and we are reminded this in the book of James. We need to live our lives with that in mind, and as far as possible, to fulfill our purpose and destiny according to our calling. As the motion states, Honourable Bozoli was an accomplished professor of sociology at Wits. She had a fierce and independent mind, always probing against cliches, rejecting patronizing and implausible analysis of suffering, power, hope, and the struggle to be free human beings. Her colleague, Professor Burns, adds further that as a tribute to her life would not be complete without noting her pugnacious humor, her sparkling compelling, and even terrifying eyes as she urged her students and colleagues and helped to build one of the world's greatest universities. Indeed, she lamented and fought against the funding cuts and misspending of state assets. The ACDP agrees that she has left a huge legacy. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family, Professor Charles van Onselen, her 3 adult children, as well as her colleagues in the DA. May her soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you. From the UDM, Honourable NLS Kwankwa.
Abayomzi Lawrence Aziso Kwankwa. Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip. It's a pity that we are...
Deputy Chief Whip Unganapi.
I beg your pardon. Deputy Speaker.
That's better.
It's a pity that we are paying tribute to outstanding leaders such as Professor Bozoli, who have made a sterling contribution to South Africa, who was outstanding in a parliamentary work before I come to an academic record. We do so at a time when this gathering is overshadowed by a racist incident that took place at ENCA yesterday, when we are trying to work together to build a better South Africa for all. By the way, I was not aware of what happened up until later on the video was shared with me. What we demand and want is accountability and not a patronizing apology from the station, because clearly they have a different set of rules for black people and black leaders and a different set of rules for white leaders and white people. I've seen that in videos that have been compiled by friends. Yes, you must check it, you will see. Thank you very much, but without deviating from the subject at hand, I apologize, Honorable Steenhuisen, for that. It had to be addressed. Professor Bezoli was an outstanding academic who followed a father's footsteps. Professor Bezoli, who served at the helm of VETS as the Vice Chancellor and Principal from 1969 to 1977. This undeniably remained a family trait because Professor Bezoli too served in a variety of roles at VETS, but leading sociology in particular. Professor Bezoli was an outstanding A-rated academic by the National Research Foundation in 2006, the first sociologist in the country to obtain this rigorously peer-reviewed ranking, which recognized her as a world leader in her field. We would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the UDM to extend our heartfelt condolences to the family, the friends, and the Democratic Alliance of the late Professor Bezoli. May her soul rest in eternal peace. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is the ATM present in the House or on the virtual platform? They are not. Let's get to NFP, Honorable SABC. Also apparently not.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Oh, okay.
Deputy Speaker, can you hear me? Speaker.
Go ahead, it's Deputy. Go ahead and that.
Okay, the National Freedom Party was shocked and saddened by the passing of Professor Belinda Pozoli. We would like to express our deepest and heartfelt condolences to Professor Pozoli's family, friends, and political family. Professor leaves behind a very impressive resume, and through her experience has so much to offer to the South African political discourse. We are indeed saddened that this country has lost yet another member of the society and of Parliament who was committed to contribute towards driving a change in this beautiful country of ours. We wish her family, friends, and professional family strength and courage as they deal with this grave loss. Her family, friends, and loved ones, may God bless her soul. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable MGE Hendricks, Al-Jamaa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Honorable Deputy Speaker, as a graduate in sociology, I am very saddened to hear of the passing of the Honorable Belinda Pozoli, who has been an inspiration to us sociology students. The Al-Jamaa Party is sharing the sadness of the Pozoli family, her friends, the leader of the official opposition party, colleagues in the DA, and all members of Parliament. We are wishing her eternal peace, and may her family find solace in the loving memories they hold in their hearts and minds. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Madisha. He's not speaking. Okay. All right. All right. Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition, Honorable Mazoni. Sorry? I don't have an indication of anybody else.
Deputy Speaker, it's the Honourable Bax Nodada who is the DA's speaker for the condolence motion.
Okay, where is he? Why doesn't he assert himself?
I'm here, Speaker.
Go ahead, Ndati.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. Prof, as I fondly called her, even though she insisted otherwise. A leader that calls it out like she sees it, despite what the popular view would be. For the short while, I got to know her as a free mind, passionate about education, science, and how we can achieve some kind of equilibrium in a completely unequal society. She challenged the status quo and norms to fight the most forgotten in academia and science. She cared passionately about our education system. She fought that higher education, science, and innovation creates and protects pockets of excellence, and most importantly, improve in order to produce quality outcomes for socioeconomic opportunities for many. Always intrigued by what brought societies together and what separated them. Prof. Bizoli is being remembered by many as an academic with a formidable intellect and inspiration to all academics. Her passing is a tragic loss for higher education in the country. I would go as far as saying education, science, and the system of innovation generally in South Africa and the world. Professor Adam Habib described her as an incredible academic and scholar. She moved on to become senior executive of the university, and in every position that she held, life cycle, she left an indelible mark. Retired Judge Edward Cameron expressed the following: she was more than just a top-right academic, and more than just an inspiration to other academics. She was also simply a joy to have on council. She was alert, observant, witty, often very funny. She didn't say much, but she said she had a powerful, intuitive impact. Professor Thuli Madonsela further said, as an academic, she helped shine a spotlight on the intersections between race and class exploitation during apartheid. She was also remembered by Wits student Tandile Chwandi with the following words: I don't know the DA's Professor Bizoli, but I knew as an undergrad student at Wits that she would add her voice against racism and discrimination of any form as it is as unshakable. Others will remember her very closely and intimately, including myself. For me personally, as a former Deputy Shadow Minister to her, a young member of this House and the DA, Professor was a powerhouse that would challenge your thinking about the problems we face in education and thoroughly interrogate your solutions to produce quality outcomes. I had the utmost respect for the space she has given me for ideas, which were often refined by her intimate wisdom. When she was going through the most, we literally became family until the last message she sent me, which I will fondly remember. To honor her legacy and the opportunity she has laid out for many, I will continue to fight for the relevant quality education system that does not leave anyone behind, especially the poor and the most vulnerable, where the color of your skin, gender, religion, ethnicity, and your geographical location don't determine your future. I will demand excellence like she would like me to in the work we ought to do for the future of this country, so that no one is consigned to a lifetime of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Her family says it will miss her wonder and gentle yet brave nature. Her son Gareth van Onselen gave an emotional tribute during the Wits memorial, saying that our mother loved beautiful things. She devoured books and art, music and drama. She reveled in science and technology. She marveled at architecture and engineering and medicine. She was in awe of nature and biology. It's worth saying that she was brave in other ways too, astoundingly brave, both in her life and her death. But it's the world of ideas ultimately that is porous at my mother's passing. The DA would like to send its utmost sincere condolences to Professor Bizoli's family, friends, and colleagues. Thank you for sharing her with us and the world. Anga umphefumulo wakhe angaphumla ngoxolo. Rest easy, Prof. Bizoli.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes the speakers list on Professor Bizoli. I take it there are no objections to the motion being adopted. Members, please rise to observe a moment of silence in memory of Professor Bizoli. Thank you. Please be seated. We, as presiding officers, we associate ourselves with this motion and the condolences of the House will be conveyed to the Bozoli family. The second motion on the order paper is in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I now recognize the Honorable Chief Whip.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much to honorable members of this House, to all the families at our gallery today. I move that this House knows with sadness the untimely passing of African National Congress Member of Parliament, Dr. Phumza Patricia Dyantyie, who passed on Monday, 7 December 2020. Acknowledges that Dr. Dyantyie became a member of Parliament after the National General Council in 2019, National General Elections in 2019, and was assigned to serve in the Portfolio Committee of Health. We also remember that Dr. Dyantyie had previously served in many government positions, including to be a mayor of Mpashe local municipality in Amatole region. She became a member of the Executive Council in the Eastern Cape government, where she served as Health MEC as well as Social Development MEC respectively. We recall that her career within the ANC spent decades as she served in as Umkhonto weSizwe, a soldier and a nurse during exile in Angola, before she moved to Cuban School of Medicine and earned a degree in medicine. Further recalls that whilst in Umkhonto weSizwe, she was a section commissar and part of the Mukanda Detachment Company 1, Platoon 2, where she survived the notorious bombardment of Novo Kadeng in 1979. Nanjalo siyamqonda into yoba xa bekuthethwa ngalomthetho uyilwayo wenkonzo zempilo ezifikelelekayo ezaziwa njengoba yi-NHI, ubetshotshentla kuba ubefuna impilo elinganayo kumuntu wonke. Believe that her departure is a great loss to the entire country, and he left us at a time when we face serious challenges which requires her expertise njengoko ubengugqirha uphume izandla eqeqeshwe phaya eCuba. Convey our deepest condolences to the Dyantyie family and friends. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Let me invite from the DA, Honourable Gwahube.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, there is a widely held perception that many members of this House are sworn enemies, that perhaps we despise each other and would not even greet each other in the corridors. In reality, this could not be further from the truth. We are opponents, but we are not enemies. We may represent different political parties. Ukuva kwami ngokusweleka kwakhe, I was absolutely gutted. Ebengomnye wabantu ekomitini yam ebethetha kumanyelwe kuba igalela lakhe